Welcome to Democratic Television, a program of Santa Clara County Democratic Party that brings insights, perspectives, and attitudes of our always thoughtful Democratic guests. Our focus today is on local government, and our guest is Ellen Kamei, who was recently elected to the Mountain View City Council. Welcome to our show, Ellen.
Great. Welcome to Mountain View.
Thank you. Yes, I believe that you may be the first guest that I've interviewed as host who has also been a host in a sense, as being a representative of the city of Mountain View, since we're here at the KMVT studios.
Great.
So it's fabulous to be here. Thank you for doing the show with us. At the beginning of our show, we like to ask our guests a bit about their background and their personal life, what brought them to the place that they're in today in public service. And so would you mind telling us, did you grow up in this area or someplace nearby?
Yeah, so my paternal grandparents met here in Mountain View. They were cutting flowers, and when I went off to graduate school, getting my master's in public administration, my grandma was going into a nursing home, and my grandpa was going to live alone, and so I moved back to be with him, and luckily I was able to get a fellowship. I've been working in the public sector my entire career, so I had a fellowship with the International City County Management Association. I got placed in Fremont. So in my mind, not having lived in the Bay Area for a while, I was like, that's not too far.
Right, exactly.
So came back here.
Had you known your grandparents before then? Had they been involved in your life? Or?
Yes, so my grandparents were interned and came back to Mountain View.
Wow.
And my grandfather was a gardener. He worked at Dinah's restaurant on El Camino, washing dishes, and then saved up enough money and opened his own flower growing nursery here in Mountain View.
Wow.
And after about 20 years, they decided to move the nursery to Morgan Hill. So I shifted a lot of my time growing up between Mountain View and Morgan Hill. And so he's the one who taught me how to drive, so it was really natural for me to come back and spend time with him after graduate school. So.
Wow, fabulous.
Yep.
That you described the trade as cutting flowers. Is that a trade term? Is that a specific term to that their industry or their?
They were, I mean, that's I guess what they did, but being in the flower growing business, they were cutting carnations and roses specifically.
I see.
In this area.
Wow.
So he ended up growing carnations, chrysanthemums, and when they decided to move the nursery to Morgan Hill, he got into poinsettias. So my first 15 years of my life was on a 10-acre nursery, you know, having a lot of time, but being outdoors, but also with very civically minded parents. My dad went to Berkeley for his law degree during the civil rights era and was very civically engaged and minded.
I imagine so, yes. And it would be hard not to be, right?
Right, exactly. So he decided, you know, to get my mother involved when they got married, and so seeing elected officials was something I started volunteering at by the age of 9.
Wow.
My mom took me with her to go meet Barbara Boxer, who was running for United States Senate.
Wow.
And I so clearly remember because I brought like this Lisa Frank stationery to go, and I got my autograph and told my mom that I wanted to pursue public service as well. And my mom actually has pursued a career in public service for the last, I want to say 30 years. So.
Wow, that's fabulous. So I know a little bit about that timing, and I remember that Barbara Boxer election, and it wasn't long after that that your mom was elected to public office. Is that right?
Yes, she started off on Planning Commission and then was on the Santa Clara Valley Water District for almost 20 years, and now she is on the Santa Clara County Board of Education.
Fabulous.
So, yeah.
Is the how did you get interested in the water district? Did that flow from your family's kind of agricultural connection?
It did. It did. She represented District 1, which is all, you know, agriculture, or it was at that time. And she actually, I'm trying to remember, between like 8th grade and going into high school, she pursued her master's in urban planning.
Wow.
So really had an interest there. So
it sounds like both your parents had that commitment to higher education, to advanced education. That's fabulous. So was there pressure on you or on them to go into your grandparents' business, to take over the nursery or be in the plant flower business?
I think once the flower growing market opened up, specifically once flowers started getting imported from Southern America, we saw a lot of flower growing businesses, small family businesses, not being able to compete with the prices.
I see.
So,
it seems like that's something of the story of a lot of farming in America.
Yes. So there are not many families that I know that still continue in the flower growing business. But last 2 years ago, in the Mountain View Historical Association had an event where they were celebrating the history of Japanese American families who were flower growers in the area.
Right.
So 3 families participated. I helped organize, and our family was one, and just kind of talking about the historical aspect. And all of those families actually are no longer in the business, kind of talking about how it's really difficult. And then you have Home Depot and Lowe's, and it became much more difficult.
Mail order things as well.
Right.
In that event that you mentioned, or in other experiences in Mountain View, did you connect with anybody who, did you learn anything about your family that you didn't already know from people that worked with them way back in the day? Or?
It's been really fun being back home these last 8 years. I've served on the Planning Commission for 6 years before I got elected, and it's been really fun meeting people who know my dad or my aunts from middle school, high school, elementary school, and have my dad reconnect with them. So he had childhood friendships that he's been able to bring back.
Fabulous.
It's been, really nice to have that. And
did that particularly happen in your campaigns? Did you meet people who knew your family from?
I mean, both. Just kind of Mountain View is a really interesting city. I think it has this small town feel, but we do have big, big policy issues. So people still know each other, and there are still a lot of families that are in the area.
Fabulous, fabulous. So Mountain View is interesting. It has a very diverse community in so many dimensions, and it does seem that there is a significant representation of kind of a historical Japanese American community in Mountain View. Is that something that attracts you to the city? Obviously, you feel it seems to have drawn you back and drawn you in again.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's more the kind of family focus of Mountain View that has kept me here.
Yeah. Your family's connection to the city.
Right.
I see.
Right, exactly. And I would say that's been my roots and my foundation of wanting to raise my own family here, more than kind of the cultural background. More that the quality of life in Mountain View is really great. When I moved back here and was living with my grandfather, I was near a trail, near a park. After he and my grandmother passed away, I moved to another part of the city where I'm walking distance to downtown, I'm near a trail, I'm near a park. Yeah. So I think that quality...
Nice livability sort of aspects.
The livability, quality of life, being near transit especially, makes it just a desirable, great place to live. And actually what was interesting to find out about our city demographics is about 25% of our city are millennials or young professionals and young people with families.
Yeah. So that's an interesting thing because your grandparents, found their opportunity in their business that they built, and there's so much opportunity in Mountain View. But I know that cuts both ways for millennials because there's a wide variety of very interesting and challenging jobs, but also just a lot of challenges to living in the area. And I'm guessing that you found in running for office that there's a need for a voice for people of the millennial generation. Is that one of the things that motivated you, or something you? Is that a characteristic of what you feel like you represent or want to accomplish in public life?
I think that there were a couple different reasons. One is that Mountain View has been a traditionally kind of middle class neighborhood, and you see a lot of that not being able to continue right now just because of the cost of housing or the lack of housing options, and so wanting to create opportunities for kind of the missing middle, those who might not qualify for any type of subsidy, but maybe that $1 million, multi-million-dollar home is a little bit out of reach. What are the opportunities there? But also, everyone on our council was a homeowner, and that dream, that American dream of being a homeowner. Now we have a council where two of us are renting, and just kind of having the diversity of the conversation and also the diversity of perspectives.
Yes. And a lot of residents of Mountain View rent, and that's a characteristic of Mountain View. It contributes a lot of housing and a lot of rental housing, so it's good for the renters to have representatives on the council. Before coming back, if I remember correctly, you had a stint in Washington, D.C. Can you just mention what that was and what that experience was like?
Sure. So right after college, I went and taught English in Japan for the Japanese government. And I came back with the idea, I'm moving to DC, I'm going to work on international education, and decided that,
I see you smiling, and then when we're young, we have our whole life planned out, right? I'm going to spend the next 40 years working on international education.
Right, but I got bit by what they call like the Potomac fever, because the Potomac River's there. And what started off as an internship for Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren turned into a job, and then I started working for Congresswoman Anna Eshoo, and this was a really exciting time in our country's history. I was there during 2007, volunteered on President Obama's election, and going into 2008, volunteered in Virginia, North Carolina, and then experienced that inauguration firsthand before going on to graduate school.
So, and that was a pretty historic year. We've had one recently. We'll talk a little bit more about that, a historic election season. You mentioned Barbara Boxer being elected in 1992, and for many of Democrats of my generation, that's the original year of the woman, because Barbara Boxer was elected, and Dianne Feinstein was elected. I believe either then, or I think that year, Anna Eshoo was elected, and then in '94, Zoe Lofgren was elected. Correct. So we really had sort of our era of electing women around here during that season. But in the time you were in Washington, the Democrats had been out of control in the House for a while and had just taken power. It sounds like a familiar story here in 2019. But that must have been remarkable to see as a young woman interested in public service.
It really was, and being able to experience Nancy Pelosi become Speaker then, and then to experience it again now, you could feel the historic nature of what was happening, and being part of something that's bigger than yourself, right? And I feel like that really was the beginning of that sea of hope and change that we saw come on in the 2008 election cycle. Right,
I agree. And it was exciting. It must have been exciting working with Zoe and Anna during that time as well, because they took on leadership positions within the Democratic caucus and were really close to supporters of the Speaker.
It's been really nice to see women in these positions of public service from a young age, because it made me think, oh, my mom, that's what my mom does. Oh, that's, what the Congresswoman does, right? And it made me think that this life of serving others and serving your community is something that was within reach, was attainable. So having these, very strong feminists as role models is kind of...
And being able to work with them so closely, like with Mom, of course, but also with Anna, and so that must have been a great experience. Well, in the second half of our show, we'll talk a little bit more about your trajectory to your current role as a member of the Mountain View City Council.
Sounds great.
And I look forward to continuing the conversation with you.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, my name's Dave Cortese. I'm the president of the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors. A lot of people come to me day in and day out asking, how can I get involved? How can I make a difference in my community? Well, one of the things you can do is contact the local Democratic Party. As a lifelong Democrat, I know that that's one of the most inspiring and useful things you can do to help people, especially people who can't stand up for themselves. If you'd like to do that, there's a couple of ways to contact them. You can use their phone number, 408-445-9500, or go to the Democratic Party website, www.sccdp.org. If you want to make a difference, there's probably no better way than contacting our local Democratic Party. Thank you.
So we're back with our guest, Ellen Kamei, a Mountain View City Council member. Thanks again for joining us, Ellen. Before the break, you shared a lot of information about your background, and I can see that there were a lot of points in your life that that kind of started you in the direction of public service and nurtured you along that way. And then, as you mentioned, eventually you came back here to live in Mountain View due to your long family connection. What has specifically inspired you to be involved in your community and to step forward and take on the considerable work involved in being a council member and getting elected as a council member?
So I think that the biggest thing that I'm able to provide is just perspective. So I've now been able to work at the federal, city, county, and state levels of government. So a lot of the points of frustration for folks, I understand. And so I really felt the calling to bring practical public policy forward, kind of public policy that works for residents. And this election cycle, we were just seeing so many things that are affecting our community, which is Santa Clara County, I think it was Joint Venture Silicon Valley, came up with a report that said a family of 4 with a 6-figure salary is now considered low income.
Wow.
So what kind of opportunities are we seeing for our families? And on Planning Commission, I was seeing a lot of market rate rental and really wanted to try to make sure that we're creating moderate, middle income housing as well as ownership opportunities for our community.
So you served on the Planning Commission, and how did you get involved in that work?
So when I was back, I really wanted to get involved right away. So I did a couple different leadership programs. I did the New Leaders Council, Silicon Valley. I got involved with Dawn, Democratic Activists for Women Now, Coming to the Party,
Right.
and Apolli, which is out of De Anza, and really wanted to
just a little bit about Apolli, what that is.
Oh, sure. Apolli is the Asian Pacific American Leadership Institute. It was founded at De Anza College, and I did what's called the CLP program, the Community Leadership Program.
I see.
And we had a seminar where they talked about boards and commissions,
I see.
where they come and they say, are you interested in serving your community? You should think about, you don't have to run for elected office, think about a board or a commission. So I started investigating in Mountain View and saw the EPC, the Environmental Planning Commission, and thought, this is an opportunity. So I had taken some planning classes in graduate school.
Good.
And specifically
and
related.
You mentioned your mom had been a planning commissioner.
Right. Yes. So
fabulous. So the Leadership Institute that you mentioned brings to my mind a leadership role you had in the Democratic Party as the president of the Asian Pacific American Democratic Club. How did you get involved in that? And can you talk a little bit about, was that a significant source of support for you in your running? I think that it's generally thought that Asian American Democrats have become kind of a force in the West Coast, especially in politics.
Yeah, when I first came back, I feel like I've been a Democrat before I could even vote.
Right.
And I actually was the 18-year-old who was like really excited about voting. I remember when MTV was still really cool, and they had this really big Rock the Vote campaign.
I remember it.
And so I was really excited, and I saw it as a way of getting back involved. So I've been a member of the Silicon Valley Asian Pacific American Democratic Club, and I think part of it is I was doing Silicon Valley Young Democrats, and there was an idea that we need more young Democrats on all the different county boards to offer the young Democrat perspective.
Right.
So through Dawn, through APA Dems, been able to create a support network, but also kind of shore up a pipeline for both young Democrats to run and Asian Pacific Islanders to run, and also women. The Santa Clara County Democratic Party in 2014 adopted a resolution which I helped work on, talking about trying to get gender parity in our elected offices. And so I think all of those things coupled together were sources of support, and thinking about at every level you're seeing Asian Americans become more involved, and I think part of it is they're realizing kind of the impact that policy decisions have on their schools, on their roads, and on their community overall.
Right, I agree. I think that congratulations on being elected recently to the city council, and I kind of feel like you're a great local example of a phenomenon that we saw throughout the country. It seemed like a lot of very well qualified women and a very diverse group of women and a lot of young women and other young candidates ran successfully in this last cycle. And I think it's sort of a democratic and response to the current president and how the 2016 election was conducted and the result of it. Did you feel that when in getting elected? I know it sounds like you were focused a lot on your local issues and your local community, but did you feel part of a historic wave or a historic moment?
I did. I think what's been exciting is, I ran 4 years ago and was unsuccessful. This year I felt like there was much more support for candidates who are millennial. You have organizations like Run For Something, which has come out. You have New Leaders Council, which has usually not been that politically active, but kind of shifted on trying to get more progressive candidates elected. And so I felt like there was more of a framework for people to get involved, and also a celebration of diversity. My dad is Japanese American, but my mom is Puerto Rican and Chinese. And I think millennial candidates were also utilizing language and bringing forward kind of language access to their campaign. Social media has really kind of taken off even more in these last couple of years, and using those platforms to really engage.
Yes.
And I think the civic engagement with voters, you try to meet people where they are, and folks, especially in Santa Clara County, may be working multiple jobs, have kids or family obligations, or trying to do extracurricular, that it's really important to get that engagement. So I think young people were able to do that. The
first time that knowing that more natively, knowing those means of communication more natively was really an advantage. So it's an interesting phenomenon and change. You mentioned one thing that I wouldn't have asked unless you brought it up, but running unsuccessfully 4 years ago. I think that example, there are a lot of successful politicians in Silicon Valley and throughout the country and throughout history who had, other than a direct path to the fabulous success that led to people knowing about them and what their accomplishments were. What was that experience like for you, and what advice would you give to a young person who was concerned about running and not being successful, or who ran and wasn't elected in the first outing?
I think that the most important step to take is making the decision yourself. And what I found this time that was so exciting is an acceptance of, if you don't do it, who will, right? Or there are issues going on in your community or nationally that are bigger than yourself. So, you need to be at the table. I also did Emerge California, and one of the things that they teach you is kind of this idea of resiliency, and you have kind of the decision to make of, all right, this happened, how will I tackle it? Will I just become more engaged in my community, or do I need to question my involvement? And I think for myself, I decided that it was time for me to resign off of the regional bodies I was on and just focus more on my community. And so I got even more involved in Mountain View, studied the issues more, and was really able to, I think, be a better candidate this time.
So it sounds like you felt like you were more deeply knowledgeable about the community and the various aspects of the job, and more connected to the community. Did you also just know more about being a candidate and what not to spend your time on and things like that? Were there any practical things like that you had just learned through the experience? Or
a candidate is always, I think, learning.
Oh yes, I'm sure. Right. Yeah.
I think that my focus was really on the residents, and as we've seen kind of on the national level, there are a lot of things that can be distracting, but it's really important to focus on the community. So I think if anything with this time running, I really tried to focus on residents and the community, and less so on the outside distractions that can come up.
Yes, I'm sure. And it sounds like from your Planning Commission service, you probably knew a lot about the land use kind of issues that face, Silicon Valley. I think that in lots of ways, Mountain View might be like the ground zero of some of the challenging issues facing Silicon Valley. And what are your just broad ideas about how to take that on, how to balance all those competing interests, find housing for people, accommodate the companies as they try to grow rather?
Well, the most important thing is to communicate. We're so lucky in Mountain View that residents, our community members, our nonprofits, our city government are really engaged in trying to find, be solutions oriented. And I think that the more that we're able to communicate, with each other on reaching that outcome, the better things will be. And so I think we're seeing a lot more collaboration. One thing that example is the North Bayshore area of Mountain View. When it was discussed maybe 5 years ago, when we were discussing it on Planning Commission, it was going to be more workforce housing. This time we're talking about it with parks, ecological design, a school, community center, much more of a kind of
more complete place, right?
Right,
Yes.
A complete neighborhood.
Yes.
And I think that has come from conversations from everyone on how do we, really truly develop this area, create housing where we're all kind of more integrated. So.
Fabulous. So it's so exciting to see you get started in your service as a council member. If viewers were to want to reach out to you, if they have some idea about how to do the North Bayshore, what's the best way to do that?
Sure. Well, my website is still up, so ellenkamei.com, or I'm on social. I think I'm on every social media platform at Mountain View Ellen, and so or my city email ellen.kamei@mountainview.gov. So
very good. A variety of ways. A very millennial answer to that question, Ellen. Well, thank you so much for our time together today. Yes. It's been a wonderful conversation, and so good to have this with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for watching DTV. Give us a call at 408-445-9500 or visit our website at www.sccdp.org. Help us to make a difference. We'll see you on the campaign trail.